Dead Man's Wire is not the kind of crime thriller that depends on fast action, endless gunfights, or dramatic chase scenes. It tells a story that really happened, and that alone makes it feel different from many other films in the same genre. Right from the beginning, the movie reminds us that sometimes the most frightening situations do not happen because of organized criminals or dangerous gangs. Sometimes they begin with one ordinary person who believes that the whole world has treated him unfairly. That idea becomes the heart of this film. Instead of trying to make Tony Kiritsis look like a traditional villain or an innocent victim, the movie allows the audience to watch his actions and slowly decide what they think about him. This approach gives the story a realistic feeling because life is rarely black and white. The opening scenes immediately create tension without using loud music or flashy camera movements. Tony walks into Meridian Mortgage expecting to meet M.L. Hall, the man he believes destroyed his financial future. Instead, he meets Richard Hall, who tells him that his father has gone on vacation. That single moment changes everything. From there, the film never loses its grip on the audience. What begins as a business meeting quickly turns into one of the strangest hostage situations in American history. Bill Skarsgård gives one of the strongest performances of his career. Many people know him for playing frightening characters, but here he does something much more difficult. Tony is not simply evil. He is angry, frustrated, unpredictable, emotional, and convinced that he is right. Bill Skarsgård never plays him like a cartoon criminal. Instead, he behaves like a man whose mind has reached a breaking point after years of believing that nobody listened to him. Every expression on his face shows pain mixed with determination. Sometimes he speaks quietly, almost like he is trying to convince himself. At other times, he suddenly explodes with rage. These changes happen naturally, making the audience uncomfortable because they never know what he will do next. The film also deserves praise for refusing to rush through the hostage situation. Many thrillers would try to fill every minute with explosions or physical fights, but this story understands that psychological pressure can be even more powerful. Watching Richard Hall sit with a shotgun wired around his neck is enough to make anyone feel nervous. The audience knows that one wrong movement could end his life. That constant danger creates suspense without needing unnecessary action scenes. Dacre Montgomery, playing Richard Hall, gives a performance that is quiet but deeply effective. He spends much of the film tied to a chair or forced to stay close to Tony, yet his facial expressions tell an entire story. Fear, confusion, hope, exhaustion, and disbelief all appear on his face without long speeches. That is not easy for any actor. Richard understands that arguing with Tony could get him killed, so he chooses his words carefully. Every sentence feels like it has been measured before being spoken. One of the biggest strengths of the screenplay is its ability to make conversations interesting. The entire film depends on dialogue because much of the action takes place inside one apartment. If the conversations were weak, the movie would quickly become boring. Fortunately, Austin Kolodny writes dialogue that sounds natural. People speak like ordinary human beings rather than movie characters trying to sound clever. Tony explains why he believes he has been cheated. Richard tries to calm him down without making him angry. Police officers discuss different plans while realizing that every mistake could cost an innocent life. Even the radio conversations feel genuine instead of dramatic. Gus Van Sant directs the story with patience. He understands that suspense does not always come from movement. Sometimes it comes from silence. There are moments when nobody says anything for several seconds, yet those moments become some of the most intense scenes in the movie. The audience keeps waiting for someone to make the wrong decision. That waiting becomes almost unbearable. The apartment itself almost becomes another character. It is not a large or beautiful place. Instead, it feels cramped and uncomfortable. The explosives placed around the doors and windows make the audience feel trapped along with Richard. Every room looks dangerous because Tony has prepared for the police to attack at any moment. The small space increases the tension because there is nowhere to escape. Another impressive quality is the way the movie shows Tony's intelligence. He is emotionally unstable, but he is not foolish. He carefully plans many parts of the hostage situation. He knows that the media can help spread his message. He understands that public attention gives him some protection because the police cannot simply storm the apartment without consequences. The film never suggests that he is a criminal mastermind, but it does show that desperation can make people think in surprising ways. The media also plays an important role in the story. As television cameras gather outside the apartment, the hostage situation slowly becomes a public event instead of a private crime. Reporters compete to deliver the latest updates while ordinary people across America watch the drama unfold. The movie quietly asks whether television helps solve the crisis or makes it even more dangerous. Tony clearly enjoys knowing that people are watching him. Every interview gives him another chance to explain his side of the story. Fred Temple becomes one of the most interesting supporting characters. Instead of shouting questions or trying to become famous, he listens. Tony trusts him enough to explain why he reached this point. Those conversations reveal the loneliness that existed long before the hostage situation began. Whether Tony's complaints are justified or not, he clearly believes that nobody ever listened until he picked up a gun. That realization is one of the saddest ideas in the entire film. The police officers are presented realistically instead of as perfect heroes. They make careful decisions because they know the danger is real. Every plan carries serious risks. If they attack, Richard may die. If they wait too long, Tony could become even more unpredictable. This uncertainty makes their work feel believable. Real hostage negotiations are rarely simple, and the movie respects that reality. Coleman Domingo brings authority and calmness to every scene he appears in. His character understands that emotions cannot control the situation. Every decision must be based on patience. His performance balances the chaos created by Tony, making their scenes together especially memorable. Al Pacino has fewer scenes than some viewers might expect, but his experience adds weight whenever he appears. He never tries to dominate the movie. Instead, he quietly strengthens every conversation with his natural screen presence. Even a simple exchange becomes more interesting because of the confidence he brings to the role. Cary Elwes also delivers a solid performance, helping create the feeling that every person involved understands the seriousness of the situation. Nobody treats the crisis like entertainment. Everyone knows that one mistake could leave a family destroyed forever. The cinematography avoids unnecessary beauty. The camera often stays close to the characters, allowing viewers to notice every nervous glance, every drop of sweat, and every sign of exhaustion. The lighting feels natural instead of heavily stylized. This decision helps the audience believe they are watching real events rather than a fictional thriller. The background music is used carefully. Many scenes contain little or no music at all. That silence becomes more powerful than a loud musical score because it forces the audience to focus on breathing, footsteps, and the voices inside the apartment. When music finally appears, it supports the emotion instead of trying to create it artificially. One of the film's greatest achievements is that it never tells the audience exactly what to think about Tony Kiritsis. Some viewers may see him as a dangerous criminal who terrorized an innocent man. Others may feel sympathy for someone who believed he had been financially ruined and ignored by everyone in authority. The movie leaves room for both reactions. That balance makes the story much stronger than if it had chosen only one side. As the days pass, both Tony and Richard begin to show signs of physical and emotional exhaustion. Sleep becomes difficult, food becomes less important than survival. Every conversation carries more emotional weight because everyone understands that the situation cannot continue forever. The pressure slowly changes both men, and Bill Skarsgård and Dacre Montgomery capture that change with remarkable honesty. Their performances become less about words and more about body language, tired eyes, and quiet moments of fear. Even when nothing dramatic happens, the audience can feel the emotional damage growing inside both characters. The film succeeds because it understands that the greatest weapon in this story is not the shotgun itself, but the constant uncertainty surrounding it. That uncertainty remains present in every minute, making Dead Man's Wire a crime thriller that depends on human psychology more than physical violence. And that choice makes it one of the more thoughtful hostage dramas released in recent years. The emotional connection between Tony and Richard becomes one of the biggest surprises in the story. They begin as complete strangers, forced into a terrible situation. Richard sees Tony as a dangerous man holding him hostage, while Tony sees Richard as the son of the person he believes ruined his life. As more hours pass, something unusual starts to happen. They begin talking about ordinary things between the tense moments. These conversations do not make them friends, but they slowly remind the audience that both of them are human beings trapped in a nightmare. Richard realizes that Tony is not enjoying what he is doing, while Tony begins to understand that Richard is not personally responsible for the problems with the mortgage company. This change is handled very naturally. The movie never becomes sentimental, and it never forgets that Richard's life is still in danger every second. One of the strongest qualities of the screenplay is that it allows silence to carry emotion. Many modern thrillers are afraid of quiet moments because they think the audience will lose interest. Here, silence becomes another form of storytelling. When Tony sits alone thinking about his next move, the audience wonders what is going through his mind. When Richard simply looks at the shotgun attached to his neck, no explanation is needed. His fear is written all over his face. These moments leave a stronger impression than long speeches. The film also does an excellent job of showing how different people react to a crisis. The police officers want to save Richard without causing bloodshed. The reporters want the latest story before anyone else. Politicians worry about public opinion. The Hall family wants Richard home safely, while also refusing to admit that Tony's accusations have any truth. Every group has different priorities, and those priorities often clash. This creates another layer of tension because solving the crisis becomes more complicated than simply arresting one man. The scenes involving M.L. Hall are especially interesting. He refuses to apologize to Tony, believing that doing so would mean admitting guilt. From his point of view, Tony is a criminal who deserves punishment. From Tony's point of view, M.L. Hall represents everything that is wrong with powerful people who can destroy someone's future and walk away without consequences. The audience may agree with one side or the other, but the film never forces a single opinion. It simply presents both viewpoints and lets viewers decide. This balance is one of the biggest reasons why the movie feels mature. It understands that real life is rarely simple. People often become trapped inside situations where everyone believes they are right. Tony clearly commits a terrible crime by taking Richard hostage. At the same time, the film asks whether years of frustration, financial loss, and feeling ignored help push him toward that decision. It never excuses his actions, but it also refuses to pretend they happened without a reason. The conversations between Tony and the radio station become some of the most memorable scenes in the movie. Instead of speaking to the police, Tony feels more comfortable talking to someone who simply listens. Fred Temple does not shout or argue. He allows Tony to explain himself. This creates an interesting contrast because the audience hears Tony's emotions directly, rather than through newspaper headlines or police reports. It reminds us that every major news story has a human voice behind it. Another impressive aspect of the film is its pacing. Some viewers may expect a thriller to move quickly from one dramatic event to another, but this movie chooses a slower rhythm. That decision works because the tension never disappears. Every hour that passes makes the situation more dangerous. Fatigue begins affecting everyone's judgment. Police officers become frustrated. Tony grows more suspicious. Richard becomes physically exhausted. The audience feels that time is becoming another enemy. Bill Skarsgård deserves special praise for showing these emotional changes. During the first day, Tony appears determined and confident. He believes he has complete control over the situation. As the days continue, small cracks begin to appear. He becomes tired. His anger grows stronger. His confidence begins to mix with fear because he knows the police could attack at any moment. Bill never overacts these changes. They happen slowly, making the character believable from beginning to end. Dacre Montgomery matches him with an equally controlled performance. Richard knows that surviving depends on remaining calm. Even when fear takes over, he tries not to provoke Tony. The audience can see how difficult this is because every instinct tells him to escape. Instead, he chooses patience, hoping that negotiations will eventually save him. This quiet bravery makes Richard an easy character to care about. The supporting cast also contributes greatly to the realism of the film. No one behaves like a typical movie hero. Police officers make mistakes, reporters struggle with ethical questions, family members react emotionally. Everyone feels like an ordinary person facing extraordinary circumstances. This grounded approach keeps the film believable from beginning to end. The production design deserves recognition because it recreates the late 1970s without constantly reminding the audience about it. Many period films fill every scene with obvious decorations to show the time period. Here, everything feels natural. The clothes, cars, furniture, telephones, office equipment, and television broadcasts quietly place the audience in 1977 without becoming distracting. The period setting supports the story instead of trying to become the main attraction. The editing is another strength. Since much of the film takes place in one apartment, the editor has the difficult job of keeping the audience interested. Fortunately, the film regularly shifts between Tony and Richard inside the apartment, the police command center, the Hall family, television reporters, and the growing crowd outside. These changes happen at the right moments, preventing the movie from feeling repetitive, while also reminding viewers that the hostage crisis is affecting many different lives. The film also explores how quickly public opinion can change. Some people watching the news begin supporting Tony because they believe he is standing up against wealthy businessmen. Others see him only as a dangerous criminal. Television interviews show these different opinions, making the story feel surprisingly modern. Even though the events happened decades ago, the public debate feels similar to what happens today whenever a major news story spreads across television and social media. One emotional scene comes when Richard speaks with his wife. Their conversation is filled with love, fear, and uncertainty. Neither of them knows whether they will ever see each other again. The dialogue remains simple, which makes it even more powerful. Real people facing such a situation would not speak in long, dramatic speeches. They would simply tell each other how much they care. The film understands this perfectly. Tony's relationship with his brother Jimmy adds another emotional layer. Jimmy clearly wants to help his brother, but he also understands that Tony has gone too far. He finds himself trapped between family loyalty and moral responsibility. This conflict gives the supporting characters more depth than audiences might expect from a crime thriller. The televised press conference becomes one of the movie's most suspenseful sequences. By this point, everyone understands that the situation is reaching its final stage. The authorities hope the event will end peacefully, but they are also secretly prepared for violence if necessary. Tony walks into the conference believing that he has finally forced powerful people to recognize his suffering. The audience knows that several different endings are possible, making every minute intensely gripping. Bill Skarsgård delivers one of his finest scenes during this sequence. Tony speaks with complete confidence, calling himself a national hero and believing history will remember him as someone who fought against injustice. His words reveal how deeply his mind has separated from reality. He honestly believes that people across the country admire him. This mixture of confidence and delusion is both fascinating and heartbreaking. When Richard finally reads the prepared statement and is released, the audience experiences an enormous sense of relief. The tension that has built throughout the film suddenly begins to disappear. Yet the story does not celebrate. Instead, it immediately reminds viewers that the consequences are only beginning. Richard has survived physically, but emotional wounds are much harder to heal. The moment when Tony fires the shotgun into the air is unforgettable. It proves that the weapon was real all along. Until then, some viewers may have secretly hoped that perhaps the shotgun was somehow fake or unloaded. That single shot destroys those hopes instantly. Richard had truly been one movement away from death for several days. This revelation makes the entire hostage situation feel even more terrifying. Tony's arrest happens quickly, almost surprisingly. One moment he believes he has won. The next moment he is surrounded and taken into custody. This sudden change reflects how quickly control can disappear. For days, Tony controlled every conversation, every negotiation, and every decision. Within seconds, all of that power vanishes. The courtroom scenes continue the film's thoughtful approach. Instead of presenting an easy conclusion, the legal system introduces another complicated question. Was Tony fully responsible for his actions, or had mental illness reached the point where he could no longer understand reality? Different characters answer this question differently, and the audience is encouraged to think carefully before reaching its own conclusion. The verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity shocks many people inside the film. The Hall family feels betrayed. Police officers who risk their lives feel frustrated. Others believe justice has been served because they see Tony as someone who desperately needed treatment rather than simple punishment. The movie wisely avoids presenting one answer as completely correct. Perhaps the most powerful moment comes after the trial, when Tony insists that he is completely sane. Bill Skarsgård plays this scene with remarkable confidence. Tony truly believes that everyone else has misunderstood him. That certainty is more disturbing than any angry outburst because it suggests that he has learned very little from everything that happened. The final meeting between Tony and Richard years later is handled with wonderful restraint. There is no dramatic confrontation, no emotional speech, and no attempt to create an artificial ending. They simply notice each other inside a bakery, silently recognize the shared history that changed both of their lives forever, and continue walking in different directions. This quiet scene says more than pages of dialogue ever could. It reminds the audience that some experiences leave permanent marks that words can never fully explain. The closing epilogue leaves viewers thinking long after the credits begin. Learning that Tony spent years inside a mental institution and later remained imprisoned because he refused psychiatric treatment adds another layer of tragedy. Richard's struggle with alcoholism shows that surviving a traumatic event does not mean life immediately returns to normal. Psychological wounds often last much longer than physical ones. The collapse of the mortgage company also provides an ironic ending, suggesting that time eventually changed everyone's lives in ways nobody expected. One of the greatest achievements of Dead Man's Wire is that it refuses to become a simple story about good versus evil. Instead, it becomes a study of obsession, justice, mental illness, public opinion, media influence, and the lasting effects of trauma. Every major character leaves the story changed, and the audience is invited to think about difficult questions instead of receiving easy answers. That willingness to trust the intelligence of viewers makes the film stand out among many modern crime thrillers that rely more on spectacle than on thoughtful storytelling.